Welcome back. Responding to all of this, our political reporter Will Keneally sat down with budget co-chair Republican Mark Bourne just hours after Evers signed the budget on Wednesday. As Bourne made clear, Republicans are prepared to fight back.
Wonderful. Well, first and foremost, thanks so much for sitting down with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to do it.
Initial reactions to any of those line item vetoes from the governor?
Well, obviously disappointed that he vetoed almost the entire tax cut. I mean, really 95% of the income tax cut was vetoed by the governor. That includes a huge middle class tax cut, something that he campaigned on last cycle and said he wanted to do, and then really, didn't do it when it was put in front of him. So that's pretty disappointing. Also, it was unfortunate to see the veto that he made with education funding to extend an annual increase out 400 years is kind of a weird gimmick. It's kind of an irresponsible way to play with the statutes and the budget. I mean, obviously, education has changed a lot over just the last 100 years. And to say that we're going to fund something annually at the same amount for 400 years is kind of ridiculous. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what state budgets are going to look like. Those are things that legislatures and governors should be crafting. So kind of reckless and silly to do something like that. And so that was certainly not a good thing to see either. And but other than that, a lot of routine things that we've seen in other prior vetoes from this governor. He doesn't like accountability, so he likes to strike reports and things. He doesn't like the executive branch to have to tell us what they're doing and how they're doing it and why they're doing it. That's unfortunate, but it's kind of expected, and that was what a lot of what we saw.
I want to step back a little bit on that tax cut. We've heard kind of a little bit of back and forth between Republicans and the Democratic governor about this kind of idea of middle class and who's going to be targeted in this tax cut. Just from your perspective, for these Wisconsinites that we're trying to target with that middle class tax cut, who are we talking about?
Well, with that third bracket that he vetoed the entire tax cut on, that's a huge group of middle class Wisconsin folks that make upper $30,000s, $40,000s, $50,000 a year are in that bracket, and that's a very middle class family in my district, and I think throughout Wisconsin. And so, that's a good sized bracket, and it includes a lot of folks, and that was where the most of the tax cut was targeted by us. At least the biggest changes. We also, hit the fourth bracket as well, because policy-wise, it's important to be competitive in the Midwest. And we see the states around us with lower, tax rates, and that's not helpful to try to get people to stay here in Wisconsin and then come here to Wisconsin, which is, a great place to live, work, and raise a family, but we need to be competitive with our tax policy. And we're not doing that now. And so there was a real missed opportunity there. And it's a stark contrast, I think, between the two parties. The Democrats believe that they want to collect as much money as they can with these tax increases and high taxes and, spend it how they see fit in government. We believe it's the taxpayers' money. They know how to spend it better, and we'd rather send it back to them. And so, we'll look for ways, I think, this fall when the legislature returns to session to try to do more tax cuts to send that money back to the people it belongs to, and that's the taxpayers of Wisconsin.
That's perfect. I was just going to ask that, what would happen to the money? I know, too, that the governor in his budget address had talked about targeting something to people making less than $100,000, single filers. Obviously, that kind of falls in the middle of that third bracket. Would you on the Joint Finance Committee consider anything like that?
I think we'll look at a variety of ways, but I think the overall policy is going to be we're going to find ways to lower taxes, and we'll keep sending him tax cuts, and hopefully he'll come to the conclusion that this is right for Wisconsin and sign one of them. But I think that's where the focus will be. I think that the legislature is not interested in spending a lot more money. We had that opportunity in this budget. There's a lot of investments, historic investments in a lot of important areas in this budget. Certainly we're proud to be able to do that too, but we know that it's important to send some of this surplus back to the taxpayers, and I think that's what our focus will be in the fall.
I want to flip to DEI for a minute. The governor took out the provision that would have cut the 188 positions, but my understanding is that he can't add that funding back in. Do you have a sense of how that will work, where we'll have these 188 positions, but still that $32 million cut for the university system?
Yeah, I guess that's really up to the system to decide how they wish to fund those positions, but I think what's most important is that we need to have a discussion about what's important in our areas of higher education, the University of Wisconsin system. We want them to focus on our workforce and on the needs of the future of Wisconsin, and not on these things that are so divisive. And so we're hopeful that the university wants to work with this legislature to focus on things that are important to the people of Wisconsin. And that's really the goal here. We look forward to having more conversations with the UW system on that and are hopeful that we can focus on improving our workforce.
Have they submitted anything, new proposal to you that would use that $32 million in a different way for anything other than DEI?
Not yet, but of course we just passed that last week. The governor just signed it here this week, and so I think we'll have discussions in the coming weeks and maybe coming months, but certainly look forward to having those discussions, and we're hopeful that the University of Wisconsin wants to be partners in our workforce and not be focusing on these things that are so divisive on these campuses.
I saw earlier today, as we're recording this earlier in the week, a statement from the Assembly Majority Leader, Tyler August, saying that it was difficult, if not impossible, under the governor's actions today to continue to negotiate with him, kind of implying that there are promises made by the governor that weren't kept in his actions today. Were there any promises that the governor didn't keep by these line item vetoes?
Well, I think it would be pretty easy to point out that the education funding, the negotiations with the governor on shared revenue and education were for 325 per pupil increases. I don't think anyone was negotiating in good faith if they're claiming that those negotiations were for 400 years. I mean, that's not anything that would have come up in any reasonable conversation with any leaders in this state capitol. So to say that that's what was negotiated, I think would just not be factually accurate. So, certainly, I know the Assembly leadership was negotiating in good faith with the Speaker. We agreed to those increases because we agree that investments in education are important, but we were certainly looking at them as 2-year increases in this biennial budget, not at 400-year increases. So I'm sure the governor is going to try to spin that somehow these, staying true to those negotiations, but there's no way that 400 years was part of that conversation, and it seems pretty disingenuous if anyone's going to claim that.
And I guess just kind of broadly, what's the tenor like between Assembly Republicans and the governor right now? Is there a path forward to still negotiate?
Well, I think it was better before that 400-year veto today. I think that we had some good bipartisan stuff that was part of this budget, from the housing package to the education to the voucher spending and choice education and the shared revenue bill and the funding for that. There were some good parts of this budget. But I think when you have a governor that plays around with a 400-year veto like that, and also when you have one who, like I said earlier, campaigned, so proud of his tax cut last budget, but then vetoes 95% of the tax cut, including a huge middle-class tax cut in this budget, it seems like he's not being real honest with the voters right now on his position when it comes to tax cuts. So I think it makes it harder to work with him, certainly.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Again, that was Will Keneally reporting. We'll be right back.